There's a truth no one prepares you for. A silent, brutal punchline to a joke you never knew you were telling. Sometimes, when you hold the threat of leaving over someone's head like a guillotine, they don't beg you to stop. They don't fight. They simply step aside and let the blade fall. And then you're the one left standing in the debris. A fool wondering how you ended up as the sole casualty of your own war. My name is Alara. I am 37 years old. Just 6 months ago, I discovered, in the most gut-wrenching way possible, that my husband, Ethan, truly meant it when he calmly agreed to our separation. Who does that? Who simply agrees to dismantle a life? I need to say this, to carve it into the very air, because the world has painted me as the villain. The pitying looks from old friends, the strange phone calls with my own mother, they all carry the same silent, damning accusation, and I am bone-weary of it. Ethan and I shared a decade, 10 years of a life intertwined. 2 sun-kissed, beautiful, boisterous boys, Kai, 8, and Jax, 5. Our life was built on a promise, a neat and tidy agreement forged in the heady, hopeful days of early love. He was a rising star at a prestigious architecture firm, his mind a brilliant maze of blueprints and structural integrity. I was a budding art curator with a passion for modernism. But when Kai came, we made a pact. He would build our world financially, and I would build our home. He would handle the steel and glass of the outside world. I would nurture the heart within our walls. Our townhouse in the leafy, affluent district of Crestwood stood as a testament to our perceived success. It was all clean lines and minimalist art, a space Ethan had designed, and I had meticulously curated. This life was supposed to be a beautiful thing, a sanctuary where I would raise our children, insulated from the harsh demands of a career. It was, I endlessly told myself, a sacrifice made for us. But what no one tells you about being a stay-at-home mother, especially after the children start school, is the crushing, echoing silence. The house, once a bustling hub of crayon drawings and toddler giggles, became a gilded cage. Ethan would leave each morning at 7, a vision in a tailored suit, smelling of expensive cologne and ambition. He'd kiss my cheek, his lips cool, and stride out into a world teeming with purpose. I'd be left behind in my silk pajamas, the scent of his coffee lingering in the air, trying to figure out what to do with myself. The boys were at school until 3. I wasn't chasing toddlers or changing diapers. The demanding physical labor of early motherhood had been replaced by a different kind of exhaustion, a mental and spiritual drain. People imagine a life of leisure, long lunches, yoga classes, afternoons spent reading in a sun-drenched nook. The reality was a formless, untethered existence. The hours stretched before me, a vast, empty canvas I no longer knew how to fill. The mental load of running a household, the appointments, the grocery lists, the silent worry about a child's cough, was a constant low-grade hum in the back of my mind. But it wasn't a job, it was just existing. And most days, I felt like I was losing my mind in the quiet perfection of it all. So yes, I started sleeping in later. If I didn't have a meeting to attend or a deadline to meet, why should I force myself out of bed at the crack of dawn? Ethan was an early riser anyway. I'd hear him downstairs, the gentle clink of ceramic, the low murmur of his voice as he got Kai and Jax ready for school. He had a system, a quiet efficiency I convinced myself was better off uninterrupted by my presence. Sometimes I'd wake in time to drive them, my hair thrown into a messy bun. Sometimes I wouldn't. It depended on the weight of the day, a heaviness I couldn't explain, even to myself. Before you judge, let me be clear. Ethan never once complained. Not once in all those years did he say, "Alara, I'm exhausted. Can you please help with the morning routine? Or, I need you to get up." He just did it. He'd make breakfast, pack their lunches, ensure their homework was in their bags, and shepherd them out the door. How was I supposed to know he was harboring resentment? I'm not a mind reader. If he needed something, he should have used his words. Instead, he chose a corrosive silence, letting it curdle into something toxic between us for years. The same pattern repeated itself in the evenings. He'd come home from a long day, and after we ate the dinner I'd prepared, he would seamlessly shift into dad mode. He'd orchestrate bath time, read stories with animated voices that echoed up the stairs, and tuck them into bed. He never asked for my help. I'd be on the sofa in the living room, the cool blue light of my phone illuminating my face, scrolling through other people's perfect lives. I was decompressing. That's what I called it. I know how it sounds, but you have to understand. I needed that escape. Being responsible for a home, even a quiet one, is a relentless mental marathon. My phone, my shows, they were my way of shutting my brain off, of finding a moment's peace in the endless hum of responsibility. I figured he cherished that time with the boys, that sacred father-son bonding. I was giving him a gift, wasn't I? Weekends became his domain, too. He'd be up early with the boys, the smell of pancakes wafting upstairs. They'd go to the park, to soccer practice, to museums. Sometimes they'd ask if I wanted to come, their hopeful faces peering around my bedroom door. But I was tired. Weekends were for recharging, weren't they? That's their entire purpose. He seemed fine taking them on his own, and the boys never complained. So I saw no problem. But apparently, there was a problem. A silent, colossal one. After years of this routine, a chasm had formed between us, and Ethan began to change. He'd come home from work, and the air would grow thick with unspoken things. He'd give me a perfunctory kiss, and then focus entirely on the children, his conversations with me reduced to clipped, almost sterile exchanges. After the boys were asleep, he'd disappear into his home office, the door clicking shut with a definitive thud. He started going to bed early, claiming exhaustion from work, leaving me alone in the vast, silent living room with the ghosts of our vibrant past conversations. And then the questions started. They were subtle at first. "What did you get up to today?" he'd ask, his eyes not on me, but on the sports scores on his phone. It felt less like a question and more like a covert audit. Soon, they became more specific, more invasive. "Where did you go for lunch? Who was that you were on the phone with? What did you do with your time between 9 and 3? It felt like an interrogation. I was a grown woman, a wife, the mother of his children, and he was treating me like a criminal on parole. "I'm an adult, Ethan. I don't need to account for every minute of my day." I'd snap, my voice tight with indignation. Then I'd turn it back on him. "Where did you go for lunch? Who did you talk to today?" And suddenly, he'd become defensive. His face would shudder. "It's not the same," he'd mutter before changing the subject. Talk about double standards. The whole dynamic felt twisted and off balance. Here I was, holding down the fort, managing our home, raising our sons. I had given up my career for this family, for our marriage. That was a sacrifice, a monumental one. But instead of gratitude, I was met with suspicion and a palpable resentment I could feel rolling off him in waves. I tried to talk to him, to break through the wall he was building brick by silent brick. "What's wrong, Ethan? Talk to me." And every time, the same infuriating, dismissive answer, "Everything's fine." Classic. The classic male maneuver, bottle everything up, deny there's a problem, and then act surprised when the dam bursts. If he had issues with how our lives were structured, he should have said something years ago instead of letting it fester. How was I supposed to fix problems I didn't even know existed? We were stuck. He was a ghost in his own home, and I was walking on eggshells around his moods, trying desperately to hold our family together. The boys noticed. That was what broke my heart. "Why is Daddy sad?" Jax asked me one evening, his small voice filled with a worry no 5-year-old should carry. What was I supposed to say? That their father was having some sort of midlife crisis and was taking it out on all of us? Looking back, I can see that we were both withdrawing. But at the time, all I could feel was him pulling away, leaving me stranded. I was still there. I was still trying. The first time I threatened to leave, it wasn't a real threat. It was a flare. A distress signal shot into the dark, hoping he'd see the light and navigate his way back to me. It was a way of showing him how serious this had become. His parents were planning a week-long visit. Under normal circumstances, I'd have gritted my teeth and played the gracious hostess. But these weren't normal circumstances. I was emotionally frayed, worn raw by his coldness. The last thing I had the energy for was a week of forced smiles and polite conversation with his mother, who had always subtly disapproved of my unstructured life. I need them to stay in a hotel. Ethan, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I'm not up to hosting right now. It seemed reasonable. A wife expressing a need. But he dug in his heels. They've already made plans. It would be rude to change things now. He wasn't listening. He wasn't seeing me. Wasn't considering the emotional toll. He saw only logistics and obligation. So I let the words fly, sharp and desperate. If you care more about your parents' comfort than your wife's well-being, then maybe we have bigger problems than I thought. Maybe I should just pack a bag and leave if that's how little my feelings matter to you. I expected him to pause, to see the hurt behind the anger, to realize he was being insensitive. I expected a compromise, a discussion. Instead, he just stared at me for a long, silent moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, his voice stripped bare of all emotion, fine. They can get a hotel. He said it to shut me up. Not because he understood, but because it was the path of least resistance. That cold, detached compliance felt like a deeper betrayal than any shouting match. In the past, our fights were fiery, emotional. We'd yell, we'd cry, and then we'd find our way back to each other. This time, it was like he didn't even care enough to fight with me properly. He just gave in, and the silence that followed was deafening. That was the turning point. After that, I noticed how he would completely shut down any time I tried to breach the wall between us. If I said, I feel so disconnected from you, he would just nod slowly and say, okay, without a single suggestion for how to fix it. If I whispered in the dark, I feel like we're drifting apart, he'd agree. I know, he'd say into his pillow. But he never once suggested we see a counselor or plan a weekend away. It was like he had already accepted our fate, checked out of our marriage long ago, merely performing until the final curtain call. So, I started bringing it up more often, the separation, the end. Not because I wanted it. God, no. I brought it up because I needed him to be terrified of it. I needed him to fight. When the person you love is pulling away, sometimes you have to show them the abyss. You have to make them look over the edge at what life would be like without you. It's not manipulation. It's a desperate form of communication. It's saying, this is where we're headed if you don't turn the wheel now. But his responses only grew stranger. Instead of fighting for us, instead of a panicked, no, I don't want that. Let's work on this, he'd just get quieter, more withdrawn. Sometimes he'd even agree with the premise. Maybe we aren't compatible anymore, he said once, the words so shocking in their quiet, damning resignation that they stole the very air from my lungs. Who says that? Who agrees that their marriage might be over instead of fighting tooth and nail to save it? I kept waiting for him to snap out of it. I gave him so many chances. Every time I brought up how unhappy I was, every time I mentioned that maybe we'd be better off apart, I wasn't stating a desire. I was asking a question. I was begging him, prove to me that I'm wrong. Prove to me that our marriage is worth saving. He never did. He just kept agreeing with me in that flat, lifeless way that made me feel like I was screaming into a void. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. It was gray and drizzling outside, a perfect pathetic fallacy for the state of our home. We'd had another one of those awful, circular non-conversations the night before, where I was practically on my knees, begging him to show a flicker of interest in our relationship, and he just sat there like a statue, absorbing my words with a placid indifference that felt like a brutal physical blow. I was so hurt, so profoundly shattered, that I felt I might simply crack. That afternoon, Kai came home from school and found me crying silently at the kitchen table. He put his small hand on my arm. "Why are you and Daddy acting weird?" he asked, his 8-year-old eyes wide with concern. I know how it sounds. I know what people will say. But in that moment, I was drowning and his question was a lifeline. I needed someone to understand. So, I told him a carefully edited version of the truth. Sometimes, sweetie, grown-ups have problems they can't fix. And sometimes that means families have to change a little. When Ethan found out I'd said that to our son, he absolutely lost it. It was the most emotion I'd seen from him in months. But it was a cold, controlled fury. A glacial rage. "You have no right," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You have no right to involve the kids in our problems." That was selfish and destructive. Rich, indeed, coming from the man who had been emotionally abandoning his family for the better part of a year. The kids aren't stupid, Ethan. I shot back, my own voice rising to match his suppressed rage. They can feel the tension. Maybe if you'd actually tried to work on our marriage instead of just giving up on it, we wouldn't be in this position. That's when I did it. I pulled the pin on the verbal grenade I'd been holding for months. I'm done, Ethan. I'm done with this indifference. I'm done feeling like I'm the only one who cares about saving this family. If you want to act like our marriage doesn't matter, then maybe it doesn't. Maybe we should just get separated and stop pretending we have something worth fighting for. I was hoping, God, I was praying, that this would be it, the final desperate gambit that would finally wake him up. That he would see the chasm yawning before him, realize what he was about to lose, and finally act like a husband who wanted to stay married. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just looked at me, and the strangest expression crossed his face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was relief. A calm, almost peaceful relief. He held my gaze for a beat, and then he said the 5 words that ended my world. You're right. We should separate. Just like that. A decade of marriage, 2 children, a lifetime of shared memories and inside jokes, all incinerated with a single, quiet sentence. He was ready to throw it all away, not in the heat of passion, but with the calm, chilling finality of a pre-planned business decision. He was letting the blade fall. The next morning, I woke up expecting devastation. I thought I'd find him on the couch, sleepless and hollow-eyed, ready to take it all back. I imagined a tearful, raw conversation where we would finally truly talk. Instead, I found him in the kitchen, humming. He was making pancakes for the boys, flipping them with a practiced ease, his movements light and almost cheerful. The air was filled with the smell of sizzling batter and maple syrup, a grotesque parody of a happy family breakfast. When I tried to talk to him, my voice thick with sleep and unshed tears, he just looked at me, his expression placid. I've been thinking, Ethan. I started. He cut me off, not unkindly, but with a firmness that chilled me to my very core. I think you're right, Alara. We should move forward with the separation. He said it as if we were discussing a leaky faucet. Like our 10-year marriage and 2 children were mere line items on a sterile to-do list he could check off before moving on to the next task. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to break down and admit he didn't want this. But as the days bled into a week, Ethan seemed more relaxed and content than I had seen him in years. He was still the perfect father, school drop-offs, bedtime stories, weekend soccer games, but now he seemed genuinely happy doing them, not just going through the motions. Meanwhile, I was coming apart at the seams. I'd call him at his office, my voice breaking as I tried to explain. I didn't mean it, Ethan. I was just frustrated. I wanted you to fight for us. He would listen quietly on the other end of the line, and then respond with a detached, almost clinical sympathy that cut deeper than any anger. I understand you're upset, Alara, but I think this is for the best. For the best? How could shattering our family possibly be for the best? I tried everything. I showed up at his firm one afternoon, thinking a face-to-face conversation away from the tension of our home might break through. His colleagues gave me pitying, uncomfortable looks. Ethan seemed visibly mortified. He walked me to the parking garage, and under the harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights, he very calmly explained that he had already spoken to a lawyer and would be moving into a furnished apartment downtown by the end of the month. A lawyer. He had already talked to a lawyer while I was at home agonizing over how to save us. He was meeting with someone about how to end us. That's when it truly hit me. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction to our fight. He had been meticulously planning this, maybe for months, maybe for years. My threat wasn't the cause, it was just the catalyst. It was the perfect excuse he'd been waiting for. A perfectly wrapped gift of an exit strategy I'd handed him myself. The worst part was watching the boys. Their confusion was a constant, agonizing throb in my chest. When is Daddy coming home? Jax would ask, his thumb in his mouth. Did we do something wrong? Kai whispered to me one night. And Ethan? God, my blood still runs cold with fury. Ethan seemed fine with it all. He'd pick them up for his scheduled weekends, looking rested and happy. He'd take them for fun outings and bring them back, chattering about the great time they'd had. It was like he had compartmentalized his existence into insulated boxes that never touched. Work Ethan, Dad Ethan, and this new, separated Ethan. But I couldn't compartmentalize. I was living in the desolate wreckage. I was the one trying to explain to our children why their parents couldn't be in the same room. I was the one dealing with the endless, soul-crushing mountain of paperwork, the practical nightmare of untangling a decade of a shared life. I kept giving him openings to change his mind. When he'd come to pick up the boys, I'd try to start conversations about us, about counseling, about taking things slow. But he had a new way of talking to me, polite, formal, and utterly distant, as if I were a business acquaintance. "I think it's better if we keep our conversations focused on the kids," he'd say. Who talks like that to the woman they build a life with? The really twisted part was the chorus of approval he received. His family, our mutual friends, even my own sister. They all kept praising him for handling things so maturely and putting the kids first. They saw his complete emotional detachment as something admirable, not devastating. No one seemed to understand that his glacial calm wasn't maturity, it was a devastating indifference. 2 years have passed since that night. 2 years that feel like a lifetime and an instant all at once. My life is a small, quiet thing now. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment across town, one that feels perpetually temporary. I found a job at a small commercial art gallery, a pale, diluted imitation of the curatorial career I once dreamed of. It pays the bills barely. The loneliness is a suffocating shroud, a weight on my chest when I come home to an empty apartment on the nights the boys are with their dad. Ethan, meanwhile, is thriving. He was made a partner at his firm. He bought a beautiful new house in a neighborhood with better schools, a house with a big yard and a room for each of the boys. He coaches Jax's baseball team. He seems to have found a new, effortless, radiant joy in fatherhood. And he is Clara. I saw them together for the first time about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, at Kai's soccer game. She was pretty in an understated, natural way, around my age, with a warm smile and the kind of easy confidence I'd always envied in other women. She was cheering for our boys, high-fiving them when they ran over for water, laughing at something Ethan said. And Ethan? God, he looked happy. Genuinely, incandescently, undeniably happy, in a way I hadn't seen in years. He had his arm casually draped around her shoulders, smiling and joking with the other parents. He looked completely at ease, a man utterly at peace within his new world. It was like watching a different person. After the game, the boys dragged me over to meet Daddy's friend, Clara. She was warm and friendly, complimenting me on how well-behaved the boys were. She asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime to coordinate schedules. There was no trace of malice, no hint of a triumphant smirk in her eyes. It would have been so much easier to hate her if she'd been a monster, but she was just nice. I found out later she's a teacher at the boys' school. They'd started talking during parent-teacher conferences and pickups, a friendship that slowly, organically turned into something more. She was divorced, too, with a daughter around the boys' age. Watching them together is a special, exquisite kind of torture. She brings snacks for both families at games. She celebrates our boys' achievements as if they were her own. And Ethan responds to her with a relaxed gratitude and unburdened affection that sharply highlighted how tense and demanding I must have seemed in comparison. The boys adore her. They come home from their weekends at Ethan's, chattering about the fun things they did with Miss Clara, how she helped them build a model rocket or taught them a new card game. She's careful not to overstep, always referring to me as your mom, but she is a fixture in their lives now. A happy, stable, undeniably positive fixture. I tried dating. It was a disaster. I'd sit across from these strangers, comparing every one of them to Ethan, exhausted by the sheer prospect of recounting my entire shattered life story from scratch. I'd never realized how much he'd been carrying until I had to carry it all myself. The finances, the house repairs, the endless mental load, now doubled by the logistics of co-parenting. I heard through a mutual friend that Ethan started therapy during our separation, that he'd been working on himself, dealing with issues he'd never once mentioned during our marriage. Part of me was furious that he was never willing to do that work for me. But mostly, I was just devastated that he had been capable of such profound growth and transformation all along. He simply hadn't desired to undertake that journey with me. The final, soul-crushing blow came when I overheard Kai talking to a friend on a sleepover. He wasn't trying to be cruel. He was just an 8-year-old stating a devastating, unvarnished fact. "My dad is demonstrably happier now," he said. "He smiles all the time. It's just more fun at his house with Clara." His words echoed the truth I had so desperately tried to deny. Ethan's life, and by extension, our children's, had demonstrably, genuinely improved after he walked away. I spend my nights trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. But the more I think about it, the angrier I get. Not at myself, but at him. I was a good wife. I gave up my dreams to raise our children. I tried to connect with him even when he was a frozen block of ice. He was the one who gave up, who chose the path of least resistance, of convenient erasure, instead of the brutal, necessary work of repairing what we had. And now he gets to be the self-made hero of his own narrative, the devoted dad who found happiness after a difficult marriage, while I am cemented as the bitter, discarded ex-wife who somehow engineered his escape. Why? Why did she get the man I'd always wanted him to be? Why did I get the withdrawn, distant, checked-out version while Clara gets the attentive, affectionate, vibrantly present one? So, here I am, 2 years later, watching my ex-husband live his best life with a woman who gets the version of him I was always begging for. Everyone tells me to move on, to be happy that he's happy for the sake of the kids. But I'm not. I'm bitter, and I'm resentful, and I am utterly lost. I keep expecting to wake up from this nightmare. I keep expecting him to realize that Clara doesn't have our history, that she doesn't know him the way I do. But he seems to have decided that our history was a bag of inconvenient baggage he was better off without. He decided that 10 years and 2 beautiful children were things that could be discarded without a second thought. And maybe I'm better off knowing that about him instead of wasting more of my finite years on a man who, perhaps, was never truly present from the start. Even if it means I'm the one who ends up alone, crying myself to sleep while he basks in his picture-perfect happy ending with someone else. If this story resonated with you, or if you have a similar experience, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories, and hit that like button to support our work. Your engagement means the world to us. Thank you for watching.